Hello there, this is the Soul Diva connecting with you from across the Golden Veil.
To die, to sleep perchance to dream. For in that sleep of death, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, what dreams may come. Who would bear the whips and scorns of time, to grunt and sweat under a weary life, if not for the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country, from whose shore no traveler returns. Thus, conscience does make cowards of us all. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, to be or not to be, that is the question. Because in that sleep of death, what dreams may come. You are listening to spiritual voices across the Golden Veil, raising the vibration of the universe, one pulse at a time. I'm your ghost hunting host, Wayne Preston, Curtis Thomas. Thank you for joining the airwaves of Cryptic Frequencies, a blog talk radio show dedicated to defining the obscure and exploring the mysterious. She'll be with us shortly, Mama Mary Bassett to the show, co-host and the producer of this show. But before that, let's meet our very special guest, Amberrose Hammond.
Hey, Wayne. Thanks for having me.
Amberrose Hammond. You're a legend.
Oh, whatever.
You are a legend. Yes, I wanted to talk to you for at least a year now, and finally here we are.
Right.
You have so much
it's been
to talk
a weird
about.
year.
Oh, yes. I know. We share several acquaintances. I interviewed Bill Konkoleski last night. I'm sure that you know the haunted guy from Mackinac Island.
Oh, Todd. Yep.
Todd Klemp. Yeah, he has great stories. But I'm interested in some of your stories because you said you can freak us out. I read that. You can freak people out with your stories. So I don't scare easily.
Well, it's funny because a lot of people ask, like, oh, how'd you get started in ghost hunting or paranormal investigation? And I don't really have a great origin story. I was just one of those kids that was interested in this stuff from day one. Always like creepy books, scary stories to tell in the dark, or like my age group watching and reading Goosebumps, horror movies, all that kind of stuff. Twilight Zone, even the old stuff. And then in around 2000, I got to thinking that Michigan was like the single most boring state ever for ghosts, because in any of the books I would read about haunted places around the U.S. or the world, like Michigan just never seemed to be included. And the budding internet at year 2000, I get on the Oracle, that's Google, and I start searching what's haunted in Michigan, and then I discover these ghost hunting dorks. I'm like, okay, who are these people? And there was a group in West Michigan that I became friends with, and then started ghost hunting, and that's really how I got involved. A lot of my lectures, I tell people that I'm more scared of the living than the dead, because over time, a lot of people think they equate the paranormal with being terrifying and scary. And I became more scared of some of the living people we were dealing with at home investigations than I was any kind of ghostly entity that I found. So I've actually become less scared of the paranormal over time, just because I've come to think of it as more normal than a lot of people do. I think a lot of the stuff that happens with hauntings and haunted places is just part of our environment and something we can't pinpoint and really put under a microscope because it's so spontaneous. But I think it's just part of our world. I think
you're getting accustomed.
Encounters. Go ahead, Wayne.
I think you're getting accustomed to it after 20 years of doing it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and when I got started, digital cameras were in their infancy. And that was like the hot tool for a ghost hunter to get because, you know, you had to go take a bunch of pictures with your 35 millimeter in the cemetery at night, and you'd go get your film developed for, you know, $15 a pop, and you'd end up with all these blurry, gross, bad photos. And then so everyone's like, oh, get the digital camera. And those early digital cameras had a lot of digital artifacts in them. They were new. And so these strange things would show up in the photos, and we were all like, oh, my God, it's ghostly. Oh, my God. And after a while, I'm like, especially orbs. Orbs was the big one. And I'm like, like these things showing up in the photos, I don't think they're paranormal. I think it's something with this technology. And so it's funny how that kind of stuff changes with time. The stuff that you used to find spooky, you find mundane reasons for. And sure enough, when we got better digital cameras, you know, a lot of those orbs and funky things showing up in your pictures just disappeared.
Yeah, orbs, there can be an artifact of the process. You're using the digital equipment. And there's so many explanations, real-world explanations that can create orbs, you know, dust, insects, moisture. But I'm glad you started exactly where you did because I wanted to start before the beginning, your early experiences, maybe your friends or family, how they might have influenced you. And what spiked your interest. I wanted to hear all about that and who might have helped you along the way.
Yeah, it was like my family has always been really open-minded about this kind of stuff. I know my grandpa, who's a little on the religious side, was kind of like, well, what are you doing going out at night looking for this stuff? And I kind of was like, well, Grandpa, you know, the Bible's full of paranormal things and burning bushes and Moses parting the seas. I'm like, it's all, you know, paranormal. It just means beyond the normal. And he's like, oh, okay. So, and my dad was big into horror movies and stuff. So it just kind of was an interest, and it wasn't discouraged at all. And then it was just my own curiosity that led me to kind of stumble upon paranormal investigation, and then continuing my education beyond just what I would read in books and actually going out and exploring it and, you know, gaining the actual experience in it.
Yeah, you have a Bachelor of Arts degree from Grand Valley in English.
Yeah, well, that funny thing with that is everybody in my degree back in around 2004, 2005, they were all going into teaching. And that was the last thing I wanted to do was sit and babysit a bunch of kids and try to convince them that, you know, reading literature is cool. So I didn't really know what I was going to do with that degree. So when my publisher, the History Press, approached me and said, hey, we're starting this new series on hauntings across America. Do you know of anyone that could, you know, would be interested in writing a book for us? And I'm like, you know, hand going up in the air. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. Because I've always enjoyed writing, and I really enjoy the research. Because I think when I started going into people's homes and businesses, like I said, I got more disturbed by the people. Because I'm like, I think there's another issue going on here. It's not ghosts. Like there was, you can encounter a lot of mental illness sometimes with people that are quick to jump to paranormal conclusions, and that's a blanket statement right there. I'm not saying that anybody that has a paranormal experience has a mental illness.
I know what you're saying, right? I know what you're saying.
You would find people that they weren't able to search for those mundane reasons. And so I don't know. We got into some weird situations, and then I realized I really enjoyed the research side of it more. Why does something become haunted? What's the story behind a legend? How many versions of that legend are there? Why do those legends perpetuate? How do they change over time and through the decades? And so that's what I became obsessed with and kind of got out of the investigation side of it, let's say, like such as going into someone's home or business, and started looking sort of backwards in history to try and figure out where these things came from. And that's really how a lot of my books got started, because I only have one ghost book, and that's Ghosts and Legends of Michigan's West Coast. And
right,
like two other books I have
2009.
published. Yeah, and that was like, God, I have to think like it's 10 years old already. I'm like, oh. But the other two books are actually true crime, because while I was going through a lot of old newspapers, looking stuff up, I would come across these headlines that would say things like, argument over cows ends in death. Like, what? I have to look this up. And so I just found all of these obscure true crime stories that I just were forgotten in newspapers. And I'm like, oh, okay, I gotta compile these and put these out. And I'm really not a big true crime junkie, but I like local history. I like learning about the more the dark side of where I'm living, and I think it's been a great way to educate people about their local history. We do cemetery tours in the Grand Haven area every fall, and it's been fun because people don't normally care about their local history so much. It's history. If you didn't like history in school, you find it boring. But let us tell you about your local history through the guise of a ghost story and or a true crime story. And then people are at attention.
Right. Yeah, 2011, you published Wicked Ottawa County, Michigan. And then 2014, Wicked Grand Rapids. And you talk about the seedy side of the towns.
Yeah.
I know a lot of stuff happened way back in the 18th century and that. And especially on West Michigan side, over there by the coast. Muskegon was a really rough area, I guess. I was really interested in some of the stuff that you had in your books, like Wicked Ottawa County. You talked about Ku Klux Klan, Babyface Nelson. So Babyface Nelson, of course, would be like mafia type of thing.
Yeah.
But Ku Klux Klan in Ottawa County, that surprised me.
The Klan that showed up in Ottawa County in the early 1900s, in the 1920s, was sort of a different Klan than what people are familiar with what happened during and post-Civil War, where it was predominantly going after African Americans. The Klan, the second wave of the Klan, was more political. It was like anti-Catholic, anti-Jew. It had a weird different path. And in Grand Haven in West Michigan, like some of the stories I reported on in the book, there were people that would show up to these meetings because they were offering something free, like free soda, or stop by and get this and come to our meeting. And these guys would show up and be like, okay, cool, what's this meeting about? And then realize, I'm at a Klan meeting. And I forget if it wasn't that long ago, it was like maybe, I don't know if it was the late 90s or early O's, but in Nunukah County, they discovered in someone's attic a whole trunk of Ku Klux Klan memorabilia, and it belonged to a guy who was, I don't know if he was like a grand wizard or just someone who was running one of these groups in the area, but they found all kinds of membership cards. So they actually could pull the names of the people that were involved in the past in that organization, which was kind of an interesting little treasure trove of local history, and especially when you start to recognize some of the last names and families that are still around in the area. You know, it's not their fault now, but it's like, great grandpa was involved in this.
Yeah, I had no idea that was going on this far north. Very interesting.
Yeah, it's not something that people associate with the North. They always think the South, but the Klan had their mitts and all kinds of stuff all over the place.
Now, in Wicked Grand Rapids, the Meena Dekker story, that was something that I covered as a ghost hunter. That, in order to join my team, I had to set up an investigation, and so that's the one I set up. We actually had Fox 17 was there. That's when Darren Cunningham wasn't in his position that he's in now. So he was there filming, and we were in Ritz County, and there was McFadden's, and then Ritz County, and the guy from Ritz County had seen full-form apparition in his basement. Oh, wow. Yeah, he was ready to call the police. He looked up, and then it was disappeared. And then, so we were in there. That was really interesting. She was, 38 years old, bludgeoned to death. It's one of Michigan's unsolved mysteries, murder mysteries. Yeah, it's one of the oldest cold cases. And her brother, go ahead. No, you really did a lot of respect. That's what you're going to start to say, how you got a hold of the family and got permission. I love how you did that. I know I talked with some people that were close with her family, because I don't know if he is now, but her brother was still alive when I wrote that story.
And I had gotten permission from them to use her senior portrait in my book. And the only thing that they were, I think because the one guy I was going through, he knew my background with ghosts, and obviously they knew that there was rumors of her to be haunting the place where she was murdered. But I because this is a true crime book and not a ghost book, I really veered away from talking about her ghost, because as any family that's still alive, you know, you don't like to think about your murdered family member still haunting and being miserable in the spot where they were killed, you know. So some people don't dig that. I know even with our ghost tours, not ghost tours, but our true crime tours of the cemeteries, we only tell like a couple little ghost stories, because there's so many people still that are like, kind of, they think like talking about ghosts in the cemetery is disrespectful on some level, especially if maybe it concerns their family, which is still in the area. And so we just, it's always something to be mindful and respectful of, that not everyone appreciates a ghost version of their family story.
Right. That respect is a big word, and especially if you are out ghost hunting or talking to the dead. And I know you got a little disillusioned about going into people's houses, and after 10, 12 years of doing the same that way, it felt like we weren't paying the dead enough respect. Too often the clients, if you told them there wasn't anything there, then they're upset with you because they were sure there was.
Yep. Been there.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like I love how you so much respect that you showed, because you know, when we did the Meena Dekker story, I was hoping to find some clues. I was disillusioned. It was my very first case that I set up. And my grandfather was a ghost hunter. He actually dug up bones. He was minister. He ministered his own church, and then he was paid to stay in people's houses where he would follow the spirits. And he dug up in basement walls and floors. I actually shared that story with you because I saw you at a book signing.
Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah. My grandfather did the real, he was the true thing, the real thing, back before they had all this equipment that everybody uses nowadays. But yeah, and he told me that ghosts are more afraid of you than we should be of them. And, you have to kind of get their trust before they will come to you, and then you can follow them and get some results. But I never found any bones in, 10, 12 years that I did it. So it wasn't anything. It wasn't anything. Yeah, it wasn't anything like he described. I think I saw some good that we were doing for the living, but it was a lot harder to tell how much good we might have been doing for the dead, because I would smudge. We would smudge and bless the places that we went to, because I thought they needed something. So,
right.
Smudging is kind of a pagan thing, but at the end I would call on Jesus. My brother's also a minister, so I'm kind of the black sheep of the family, and my brother didn't want me to be a ghost hunter. He was warning me about the dangers. What about you? Did you try to use any sort of protection when you were out?
I don't really, because I look at it so I don't come from a religious background, so I do think that maybe if you feel something strange, prayer can be anything. I mean, it can be envisioning a white light around you. It can be sending a Care Bear stare out, some pink light. It can be anything that just puts an intention out there. But I can't think of any time where I was somewhere that I felt like I needed to activate that type of energy. There was only one investigation that I was ever on where we got like the freak outs and sort of packed up and left. And I love the fact that this happened in a brand new strip mall, because people so often assume that for something to be haunted, it's got to be from 1892, it's got to be in a Victorian home, it's got to be falling apart. And it doesn't. This kind of stuff happens anywhere and everywhere and unexpectedly. So there was a store that we knew some people that ran, and ironically it was a spiritual store. It was kind of a new age, pagan-oriented store, but they were having some issues. A lot of the usual stuff that goes along with a haunting. They were experiencing things disappearing and reappearing in different spots. They were having electrical issues. They were having issues with their surveillance system. They were experiencing things, seeing things out of the corner of their eye. The one gal that ran the store was very, very, very perceptive to stuff. And she constantly felt like there was just something very, very negative in their back storage room. She'd be in there sitting, doing inventory on their computer and just kind of get the heebie-jeebies. And she was like, okay, you know, we got to have someone take a look at this place. This is just getting weird. And so we came in there. We did an investigation. We did the usual sweep of the place. And I don't think anything strange happened that night. I think something did move. Someone had went to go pay for something and then looked up from what they were paying, and the item was gone. And they had to spend like 10 minutes looking around the store and found it clear across the store. So that kind of stuff to me is just wild. But during the second investigation, I came in. I remember it was fall and it was a chilly day. And the AC, as soon as I had walked in, their AC unit had kicked on. Now, also, they had someone come in to take a look at what was going on electrically with the place. And the surveillance company couldn't find any issues. No one could find anything wrong with any of their circuits, nothing. So that night, we were sitting in there, and we did have a lot of our gadgets out. We had the tri-field meter. We had a bunch of other EMF meters that beep, and everything, you know, all the fun stuff ghost hunters have. And so we were sitting in the back room when all of a sudden a sensitive that we worked with just kind of said, I don't feel right. And we sort of stopped and looked at her, and I can still remember the look on her face. It's like she became just kind of dazed and kept saying, I don't feel right. I don't feel right. My buddy Tom was sitting right across from her, and all of a sudden the sensitive just sort of, I don't even want to use the term lurched, but she kind of slowly lurched towards Tom with her arms out, and it was like jerky marionette movements, like something was moving her arms. She wasn't doing it. And it's like, you know, if you're outside and you hear kids playing, and you're like, oh yeah, kids are playing. But if you hear a scream, your mind can differentiate between a scream that needs help or means business versus just a playful thing. This was one of those moments when everyone's brains went, something's not right. Like, what's going on? So we didn't even have video going. There was no audio going, nothing. We were just sitting back watching what was happening. And then Tom, because he was sensitive to stuff, he afterwards said that he started to see the face, someone else's face morph on top of hers, not physically but mentally. He saw like a bearded man, and when he said, I see you, all of a sudden every gadget in that room went off. And I was like, okay, where did it sign up? What is going on? Because this was like around 2002. I'm fairly new at all this. I'm not expecting like possession and you know, all that kind of stuff to be going on. And then she sort of just slumped down, and that was it. When she woke up, she had no memory. And this was like 3 minutes. This wasn't some lengthy thing. And she had no memory of it. She oddly felt energized. And then the stranger thing was the owner of the store, who, like I said, was sensitive, she was an artist. She went and sketched immediately what she saw on the sensitive's face because she saw a bearded man. So I love having those two stories being able to corroborate with each other because Tom saw that face, Jen saw that face, and they both can come together at the end and be like, okay, what was that? But we just packed up and went home, and we did get that night some insane EVPs that I love playing when I do lectures because it gives everyone the chills. One of them is just a scream. You hear the gadgets beeping. Someone says, like, did you hear that? Someone says, yeah. And you hear a voice plain as day say, I doubt that. And it's just like, I love EVP. It's the one thing I still love. I don't love taking photos and trying to hope for a full-blown apparition to show up. It's EVP to me is where it's at, where there's still a big mystery going on.
Right. That's textbook, those descriptions. And like you say, you want like a couple things happening at the same time. You had all your equipment going off for verification, and you had all that. And then like you got about 2 or 3 people like saw the same thing. They saw in their mind, or they actually saw something physically in front of them?
Mind's eye.
Okay.
Yeah,
that
it's
is
not
a
like
great story.
Yeah, that to me. So whenever I think before that, I sort of looked at any type of possession type phenomena as like, oh, whatever, that's Linda Blair, that's The Exorcist. I don't know, it's Hollywood. I still don't think it's as common as people like to think, because right now the hot word in paranormal for years now has been demonology. And people like to be like, oh, yeah, you got a demon in your house. Sure. It's like, okay, don't go to someone's home and tell them they have a demon in their house. That's their sanctuary. Right. And we don't even know what that kind of stuff is really. So that was kind of maybe a slight reality check within the paranormal to be like, okay, some stuff like this really can happen. Like, this is wild.
I do love EVPs. I took my computer to our family reunion and asked, does anybody want to hear a ghost? And it was, we have one. Yeah, I have one real good one that says, get out. You know, it's like, get out. You know, it's all that deep voice. And they seem to share like similar tones. When I saw you the first time, when you over there, when you were doing your book signing, you showed a video of this door that closed.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't, yes, that was a good video that you had. It is. Where was that at?
The Felt Mansion. That's the Felt Mansion. And that is where one of my other spooky moments comes from. That was an awesome place to have. When that was getting remodeled, because it sat abandoned forever. To anybody out there that doesn't know what the Felt Mansion is, it's in Saugatuck, Michigan. It was built in the early 1900s by Dorr Felt, who was a millionaire inventor out of Chicago. And this was his summer home. He was terrified of fire after the Great Chicago Fire, so he built his summer home out of solid steel, slate roof, solid place, hard to tear down. And, of course, he built it for his wife, Agnes, and Agnes passed away shortly after the home was built. And so after, like a lot of these summer homes, family can't afford it after a while. So it was sold around the 40s to the St. Augustine Boys Seminary. They used it for a school for a while, and then it was sold to the Michigan State Police Post. They used it for a long time. They put a medium security jail on the property, and then after they moved out, it just sat abandoned and boarded up. So people started, kids and everybody would poke around, and it looked like your classic haunted house, along with a jail that's closed up on the property. It's the best. And so when they decided to open it up and start refurbishing it, the volunteers would have things happen. They'd feel someone touch their back. They'd see things, and they were like, we're volunteers, so we're not going to stay here after sundown. We're going home. We're not getting paid to deal with ghosts on this. So I don't know how they got – I think someone contacted West Michigan Ghost Hunters back in the day and said, hey, would you like to come around this mansion we're refurbishing and take a look? We're having things going on. So the lady that ran that at the time, Nicole, she offered to start doing ghost tours through there to help raise some money for the refurbishment, which was just awesome. So once a month
Nicole,
for like a whole summer.
What's Nicole's last
Nicole
name?
Bray.
Yeah, I
Nicole
interviewed
Bray.
her a few weeks ago, her and Reverend Duchesne.
Yes. Yeah, her husband.
Yeah, I know.
So
I hate to interrupt you because you're on a flow, and I love your stories. I love those stories, but we know a lot of people. We have a lot of people in common. We need to do the name dropping. We need to get all their names, their full names out there, because you know so many people. But yeah, go ahead with this story. I love it. Yeah, and it is a small world. Like if you're in the paranormal, a lot of us know like a lot of the same people. It's fun. It's a great little community. But we started doing ghost tours through there, and it was just the best. And of course, people are coming in expecting an experience. So no matter what happens, if someone drops a pencil, they're jumping and screaming and getting spooked out. And so I think it was around Halloween, and we had the third floor ballroom had been kind of redone. It was cleaned up. It was nice, and we had tables up there and food, and there was a little kind of fake graveyard in the back corner with decorations and stuff. And so that night we were recording, and it had gotten to like 3 a.m, and you're just sitting there staring at screens, like starting to blank out, go comatose. And all of a sudden this shadow figure appeared
in that back corner where the gravestones were set up. And it was my first time experiencing a shadow person. And when I describe shadow people to people, I always describe it as something that has density. It's darker than the darkness around it. And it's like it was sweeping. I don't know. It had like a sweeping motion to it. And then a second figure formed. We're all freaking out. And then they just vanished. And we could rewind the video and see it. And, of course, everyone there was trying to recreate it, try to make sure that it wasn't someone's shadow. Did someone walk by? Did someone do something? And it was nobody. And that was fun. And, of course, the video's long lost with some former member that disappeared.
Oh, no.
But one of the nights, they would keep the camera on the door of Agnes Felt's bedroom. And so if you go to my website at www.michigansotherside.com, or if you just YouTube Felt Mansion, you can find this video. And this was taken over the course of, it was a couple hours, so the video was edited down for time. But you see Agnes Felt's door, which she had a little sunroom off of her bedroom. And at the time, all of the windows were painted shut. And it was a hot, stagnant, windless night that night. So there's no wind coming in. And that door, you see it in the video, opens a little way, closes sort of forcibly, does it a couple more times. And then when Merle, who was an awesome guy on her team at the time, went upstairs to start taking down the equipment for the night, he was kind of the group jokester. He was always making us laugh. And he had went upstairs and I think he was like shaking his butt at the monitor. And so everyone's laughing. You hear that in the video. And then all of a sudden, Agnes, that door of her sunroom just flies open. And Merle comes running out of there going, holy bleep. And it's the best. But what he said was when that door opened, it was an icy cold blast of air that hit him. And like I said, it was a hot night. You see it in the video, and you see everyone's legs. They're in shorts. And it was just the best when that kind of stuff happened.
Yeah.
You know, everyone got excited that night and spooked out, but it's just nice to have, captured that on video, especially when you get human responses like that. They're the best.
Yep, that one is the real thing. I know it because I saw it. And like you say, it's hard to get video, so people need to check that out.
Very hard.
I can't talk to Amberrose Hammond without having you take us back to a summer night in 2001, Nunukah Cemetery.
Oh, yeah. Nunukah was sort of where I got my start. That was when I joined the ghost group. They had permission at the time to be in that cemetery, and it's a cool old little cemetery established in the 1880s. It's right off of a highway, buried in the woods, lots of old tombstones. At the time, it was sort of extra spooky because the newer stones could be handmade. So there was this eerie, like, folk art look to some of the tombstones because they didn't have basically requirements that say you have to have like a granite tombstone. You can just create your own craft and put it out there. So there'd be some wild things. And so there was always a story about maybe a child spirit that would potentially follow you around. And this was my first experience with an extreme cold spot, which, of course, is another common thing in paranormal phenomena. And I was just standing there, and I can't remember what happened first, like if I stuck my hand out to see if something would take it or if all of a sudden I had felt it. But there was just a sudden iciness around my left hand. And so I yelled for someone to come up with a temperature, a thermometer, and it was a nice warm summer night, and it got down to like the 20s by my hand, which for me, it's like there's no normal explanation for that to happen. And it was another thing that was, under a minute, you just get this random crazy cold. It's like I kind of started walking and left my hand out as if there was a child hanging onto it, and then it just dissipated. And that was a really cool experience. Again, it wasn't spooky. It's just it's more for me. It's more wonderment. Like, why is this happening? Yeah. Like, this is so wild. And it wasn't that spooky. It was just really cool.
Yeah, cold spots are a real thing. I used to carry around 3 thermometers and I would pass them out. And they were simple ones, meat thermometers, but they changed every point. So, tenths or hundredths of a degree, and they did it instantly. So we've measured not a 20-degree difference like you did, but we've measured, it's like the hottest day of the summer, and the person next to me's got goosebumps because they're chilled. Yeah. There's something going on, and then when you can actually measure it, and then you got some more confirmation there, and you get your EMF meter going off at the same time. Do you buy into the EMFs, electrical magnetic fields, that ghosts actually put off a charge?
I do. Because they're going back to like the old school psychical research societies of like the late 1800s, early 1900s. They were even making connections with EMF and ghost type phenomena. There does seem to be a correlation, because if something's energy, it's going to give off an electromagnetic field, which our detectors can pick up. And if you do your proper sweep of a place and make sure and know how to use the detectors. I know when we first started, there was a lot of people on our team that was pretty much sticking some detectors right up towards electrical sources and going, hey, it's going off. It's like, oh, God.
Right.
Like, you think about this years later, and you're like, yeah, no, that was wrong. But if you know how to do a sweep and get a feel for the place, and especially like when we were at that strip mall place where the possession took place, I don't know what else to call it, that's those gadgets were just sitting there in the middle of a room. A sudden burst of EMF naturally shouldn't just come out of nowhere and set those things off. So I do think there is a connection with those. I do think they're a useful tool. I've gotten a little bit away from using a lot of gadgets because over time I've realized they're hard to use. They're hard to get something from. It's sometimes hard to interpret the data because I'm not a scientist. And so it's not always super useful for me, except for those few times that it did, measure that cold spot or go off unexpectedly. But I feel like it comes down to personal experience, that you start to have these moments and you don't really need equipment to let you know that you had that experience. It's nice to have it because it kind of validates, but I've often told people, just go have an experience, and it is what it is. It's yours. Yeah. So I've gotten a little way. I don't really purchase new stuff, and I know there's always new things out there. People using all kinds of stuff, and that's cool. If you know how to use
some of these REM pods, they have so many bells and whistles and stuff going off. I think, and they're scaring the ghost away because, like my grandpa said, they're more of a timid, shy being or entity. So you don't want to scare them away with stuff that's got all kinds of lights, and unless it, maybe a child ghost might be attracted to something like that. But I'm with you, the simpler things, your own senses, your eyes and ears, and especially with me, my best sense, so I found out ghost hunting, is my nose.
Yeah, a lot of people experience sense when it comes to haunted locations. Yes. That's a common thing. Yes.
Yeah, and then I can tell you what death smells like. It's like strawberries or cherries. Now, I was on a case for 1 year. I started out with one team. I think they got freaked out. They wouldn't come back. I had to form another team in the middle. Yeah, it was a 10-year-old, and she was experiencing stuff, and the family was at their wits' end. They actually heard me on WLAV interviewing with Tony Gates one morning and thought their prayers were answered. And I was over there. I was just dropping off some protection prayers, so I was a little off my game. And I sat down. I was petting their dog, and I played a tape for the mother, and for the first time she heard EVPs, and the doctors had been telling her that her 10-year-old daughter was screwed up. They had her on medications and stuff.
Oh.
And the mother started crying, and I got something in me right then. My whole voice inflection changed. This dog I had been petting started growling at me. I stopped and I go, you know what? I got to do one of these protection prayers right now. I cannot bring this home with me. My wife will shoot me, and I will be possessed and dead. So yeah, I've had one in me, and I've seen somebody on our team get one where they broke down crying, and almost like a different voice was coming out of them. So there's some precautions doing this. I know you ran into some. Now you're an author, a great author. You know, these 3 books. I'm interested in all the things that you talk about. I've been to the Grand Theater in Grand Haven.
Yeah.
And the other thing, and then down the street is the Kirby House.
Yep.
I've been there a couple of times. You talk about melon heads prowling State Park, and lights of the Lake Forest Cemetery stairway. I was interested in that. This is another cemetery.
Yeah, Lake Forest Cemetery is a beautiful place to walk through. It's in Grand Haven, and it's massive. That's where we do our true crime cemetery tours. It's just a great place, but it's one of these places that's had a legend attached to it through the decades because there is now it's been redone in the past 10 years, but for a long time it was a very creepy looking old wooden staircase going up on a hill where the founders are buried. So any place in a cemetery that you have an extra spooky spot like that, of course, teens, thrill seekers, they're going to gravitate towards that. So the legend kind of got started. There was a couple stories in the place, and I do like finding different stories that are similar in other cemeteries around the world. Well, I should say around the U.S. Similar to like Ladies in White, ghostly hitchhikers. You do see these motifs in legends that are very similar from state to state. And this one had Lake Forest has a story that if you count the steps going up and then you count the steps going down, if they're different, then that's, I guess you're going to die soon. So that I should say that was, let me back this up. That was from 100 Step Cemetery in Indiana. That was the legend with that one. So then this one had a similar tale, which I thought was just an interesting connection, where you go up the stairs, and if you see a light, then you got the green light. You're going to heaven. If you don't see anything, you're going back down, like literally. So they're not exactly the same, but any cemetery that has a creepy set of staircases like that always has a legend attached to it. And because the town founder is buried up there, Reverend Ferry, and he had a really cool tombstone that got desecrated over the years. It used to be above ground sarcophagus, and now it's just the top. But somehow the Blue Man got started, that there was this blue glowing figure on top of Ferry Hill that would watch people. And what's interesting is following that through the decades, because this story seems to come from the 80s about a blue man. And going back into the 60s, you have a blue light by the gravestone of the Duncans. The Duncans have a little offset stone by the Duncan Forest, which is on one of the sides, which borders one of the sides of the cemetery. And so they wanted to be buried by their property. And so in the 60s, they don't talk about a blue man. They talk about a blue light by their tombstone, which is unusual because it's so set apart from everybody else. So again, I think stories start around those. Whether anyone actually saw a blue light, you don't know. The story's just there. And then as people start telling, it's like telephone, someone tells a story, tells someone else, it starts to change.
Sure.
And by the 80s, you have a full-blown glowing man on top of Ferry Hill. Now, I've never seen anything in that cemetery unusual. There is an area, there is a potter's field. And for those that don't know what a potter's field is, it's where a lot of unknowns are buried in a cemetery. It was like being on Lake Michigan. You'd have bodies wash ashore. You don't know who they are. Put them in the potter's field. And so there's about 1,200 bodies buried in this very, very small parcel of land. And we had a sensitive with us, and I didn't tell him anything about what that space was. And as we walked past it, he just stopped. And he's like, "What is this area?" I'm like, "Well, okay, what do you see? What do you feel?" And he started describing what he called oil slicks in the air, just like something that seemed oily to him, just kind of zipping around above us. And then I told him what it was, and he's like, "Okay, that makes sense." So that's another fun thing when it comes to psychics or sensitives. I like to just bring them in to a place totally cold and see what they get and see if it connects with any of the stories and history there.
Yeah, I've worked with some mediums and that, and well, I found out that they're a wild card. I mean, if you try to control what's going on in there, and they're on their own wavelength, so they're not so easy to fit into. Yeah. But you're a great author. I'd say everybody get out and get all of those books. And you said you even have a children's book that has been adapted from your writing. So I think that was kind of cool. What's the title of the children's book?
It's called The Ghostly Tales of Michigan West Coast. And the lady who adapted it is Diane Telgen. And that just came out in September. So you can find it on Amazon, or you can go to the History Press website. They do sales a lot. And I think it's available in a lot of Walgreens. They've been doing a deal with that publisher, so I've been seeing them pop up in there.
I'm going to look for that. I know Sharon Noir, probably another mutual friend. She's got a book out, a children's book that her dog wrote. Her puppy.
Yeah,
I guess. I don't know. Yeah, right. And then besides the books, your big thing right now is Michigan's Other Side, right?
So I've had that website for, I launched that like in 2005. And my original goal with that was to keep adding stories to it, and people would send me emails with their personal experiences, and I would ask if I could post the story, of course, without their names, and sometimes people don't care if their name's in there. And my goal was to kind of have this treasure trove of great stories to read, and really, I have not added to it a lot in the past, like 6 years. I've added a couple things because since I find these stories don't change. They are what they are, and people can still log on and leave their comments and stories and send me personal stories. But I found that with like the way the internet is these days, a lot of people were just taking my stuff and putting it on their own clickbait stuff. And so there's websites all over the place that I was like, that kind of bums me out. Like, they don't credit. They just kind of take your stuff and loosely rewrite it, and then it becomes something to generate ad revenue for them. And I was like, I don't know if I want to, give all this cool info that I have that I've taken the time to research and just throw it out there. So I haven't figured out how to necessarily include stuff without, feeling like you're getting ripped off all the time. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to save all my stuff for books or my talks. I try to keep exclusive things for when I do lectures and stuff, so it's something different than maybe what they could have read on my website or in my books. But it's just something that's there and people can enjoy, and I still get a lot of visits to it. And so one day I might figure out a different spin with it, but for now it's just a cool little website with all kinds of stories from around Michigan.
Well, I didn't understand how that worked at all. I thought you were doing you interviewed people and you did a lot of different topics, UFOs.
There's a lot of different topics on there for sure. Like, I tried to cover all aspects of the paranormal when it comes to things, and there's so much more I could add. And but I know with the UFO thing, that's something that I've become way more interested in the past 10 years than probably ghosts, because the UFO, when I experienced my first UFO around 2000, I think it was around 2009, and we were just sitting outside. It was November, and I happened to be looking up. It was a clear sky, and I saw this light that, of course, I assumed was a plane or something, and then all of a sudden it took a nosedive and started doing impossible maneuvers. And my buddy Tom was next to me, and I was like, Tom, what is that? Look up. And he's like, that's not a plane. So he ran out, got his camera. Of course, I have a new appreciation for everyone's crappy UFO photos and video because it's impossible to get anything good. And he tried to set his camera up with a tripod. And the good thing about it was that we got audio of us basically describing what we're seeing. This thing disappeared for a bit and came back. I do remember seeing some lights on it, green, red, I think white, and it was just insane what we were witnessing. Now, could this have been some type of government top secret stuff that they were working on? Sure. There's a lot of stuff that's come out about UFOs lately in the news since like 2015, and I don't know. It was crazy what we saw. We watched it for about 10 minutes, and then it was just gone. And then a few years ago, I saw something else that it looked like like the only way I can describe it is like a sort of like a jellyfish. Like it was sort of bell-shaped, translucent, reddish, and it was this thing that kind of hovered over us and just took off. And I'm like, okay. And of course we talked to Bill Konkolesky right away. You know, we're like, oh my God,
great.
Did anyone make any reports of this? Like, what is this? What did we see? And that one even confused some of the investigators we talked to. It was almost like it was an organic entity up in the air. It was wild.
Yeah,
so I became really interested in UFO stuff.
Okay. You raised the question, you know, could it be one of our own? Because a lot of the sightings are around military bases.
Yeah.
A lot of the UFO sightings, so that could very well
Yep.
be. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not from outer space, because we could be reverse engineering stuff now.
Exactly.
And that's what they're seeing. Yeah. Yeah, I like how you're really eclectic with your stories that you do. But I thought it was interviews that you did with people on the Michigan's other side.
No, it's more of my stories that I've like I feel like some staples in Michigan, like Dogman, the Nyan Rouge in Detroit. There's just like it's like a good 101 for anyone that wants to learn more about all of the legends, hauntings, UFO stuff. If they're completely new to it, you know, comb through the entire site and you'll get a really good 101 level class on all the haunted places in Michigan.
And the variety.
At this point, I can't even. Oh yeah, variety's a big thing, but I can't even begin to. There's so many more haunted locations now in Michigan from when I first got started, because people are more aware of it. They talk about it on the internet with people posting more stories. Ghost groups are still a thing. Like there's still a lot of teams, not as much I think like there were in the early O's, but it's just more prevalent now. So I know I'll be at places talking and someone will come up and go, "Oh, have you ever heard of the haunted so-and-so tavern and wherever?" And I'm like, nope. Nope.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's so many now.
There used to be a lot of ridicule. They were afraid to come forward, you know, out of embarrassment or be called crazy. One of the stories, The Legend of Knock Knock Road, was one I enjoyed. And then Ben Goldman, my friend, Ben would love that because he does all those different Blood Road and those different roads. He likes those roads. And my friend Darren Dykehouse, he likes the cemeteries. So I don't know if he's been to all those cemeteries that you've been to or not, but I'll be sure to pass some information on to him. If he hasn't been to them, he should get to them. There's one over by Byron Center, a cemetery where they see lights, strange lights at night. I used to tell people, you want to see a ghost, don't go to a cemetery, go to a museum. But
for sure.
we did get called to a cemetery, and whether it was a coincidence or synchronicity, it happened to be a cemetery where my parents were buried. And then we brought a psychic in, and I knew this was going to be trouble with this psychic because they can't seem to filter what year at all, you know, how old it might be. And I knew this was going to be a problem when she gave us 20-some names. And so, but one of the names was Clyde, not real common name, my dad's name, who was buried in that cemetery. But we weren't investigating the grounds, we were investigating buildings. And what we found, what we were led to, was storage area where they store urns of cremated people.
Okay.
I think maybe this industry's got ahead of itself. These people are dead. Here's their remains, and they haven't had any words said over them. They're not at rest. They're kind of in limbo, in between, you know, where they're going to end up. And so I think there's some unrest that comes with that. I don't know if you've ever heard of anyone suggesting a theory along that line, but it's what I ran into. I think that there's actually thousands of unclaimed urns that people have stored. They've got storage areas, and what they will do at some points, we've passed laws now where they can have mass burials. They'll just dig one hole and bury all these unclaimed urns in the same spot. And you know that can lead to trouble when there's unmarked graves or mass graves like that can lead to unrest.
Well, and there's so many unmarked.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, there's so many unmarked graves in cemeteries. It's especially old ones. It's like, whenever you're walking around, especially the old ones, like if you look at old cemetery records, you can find a ton of people buried, and you're like, wow, there's no tombstones here at all.
Right. I wanted to ask you about Michigan. We don't have the culture that they have over in Europe, thousands and thousands of years, castles, but what we do have is the Native American Indians, who entire tribes were massacred, and I think there's a lot of unrest there. And I had like 3 cases where these people were describing the exact same things. They were like minions, and they were 2 of the people lived just a couple blocks apart up in what I call the Black Hills in Grand Rapids, right where they put the S curve through. Okay. And it leads me to believe. I called Grimstone from Detroit, a team over
Chris.
there had been. Yes, because he'd been doing it for so long, to ask him if he ever ran into this. So now I'm asking you, with all your experience, minions, they were around these people's necks. They would go with them, follow them in their cars. One guy had an exorcism. It was so bad, and they were taking salt baths. I mean, these people were going crazy. These small creatures. Had you ever ran across that?
I have not, and I'm actually happy I haven't.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I know.
It's people claim that they get attachments, that they go somewhere, and that there's something that follows them. And I can't even really begin to speculate what causes that. It is a phenomenon that happens. It exists, and it's not anything I ever want to deal with. But I thankfully can, knock on anything. I don't feel I've ever had anything follow me home. I never have, but it's definitely a very real thing with a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, people got to be careful if they're out. That's why I recommend you not be some kind of amateur ghost hunter. Do it right and do it with the respect.
Yeah.
The respect
I think
that
the big
you
thing
show.
when it comes to like amateur ghost hunting is be leery if you are forming a team and you're new and taking on a personal home investigation, because if you're going into someone's home who claims to be having paranormal activity, like we spoke earlier in the show, these people could be having something going on in their life on a very human level that has nothing to do with anything paranormal.
Right.
But you are also going into a home making assumptions on what's happening. And if these people, like, for example, you go into someone's home and they're like, oh, well, we've seen these lights, or we saw like an apparition come down the stairs, and all of a sudden someone who's maybe watched a few episodes of Ghost Adventures, and they jump to the conclusion that, well, you got a demon, and then they walk out of the house. Now you've just told this person they have a demon in their house, and that, like I said, it's their sanctuary. That's their home. That's where they're supposed to feel safe. And you walk out. That's doing more damage than what the person had, pre-existing before a paranormal or amateur ghost hunter came in. And so I think there's a lot of
we had to follow a team that did that. They went in, told the family with young children that they had a demon in their house, and so they were freaking. Actually, had Beverly Fish. Beverly Fish called me. She is a demonologist, and she passed a case along to me. This guy thought he summoned incubus and got a succubus, but he was on medications, and he kept telling me, well, I'm bipolar, I'm not schizophrenic or anything, but he was definitely taking medications that can cause hallucinations. So there's no way I can determine any sort of thing there. We got to move. We got to move on because we're running out of time. You got any upcoming events that you want to tell us about?
I have nothing because of COVID.
Really? Right. I know COVID. I know.
I've done some online lectures for some libraries and stuff, and that's a totally different weird ball game than being in person somewhere. It's pre-recording a video. They put it out there for their patrons. That's been kind of interesting, but I don't know if it's something I'm going to continue. But for right now, like, really nothing until this stuff blows over and I can go back out to conferences and places and just mingle.
Now, Mary Bassett, she does have upcoming. She's opening up her shop Saturday. So I'm going to go out there to Hastings. Oh, hi, Mary. Yeah, from 11 to 5. Yeah, tell us about that. That's exciting.
Oh, it is so exciting. I'll be doing readings, and I've always had a shop in Hastings for the last 4 years, but finally we expanded to a bigger space. So I'll be able to do the readings and the energy work and still have products to help spiritual growth. So it's the grand opening. So if anybody listening wants to come out and see us.
Yeah, get a reading. They better call ahead, though, right, and book a reading?
It's all booked up. I have everything booked up until 3:30. So if somebody wants a reading, they have a limited time.
Okay. And then my big news upcoming is my WKTV podcast has gone to TV, to Comcast 25 and Universe 99, those two channels. And on Monday nights at 11 p.m., you can see us on TV, or on Saturday nights, Sunday morning, 12:30 a.m. So I'm excited about that. And then we do a little shout-out to our last guest, Marie Cisneros. I thank her for joining us. And upcoming for us would be Laura Briggs, would be our next guest. She's a psychic combination astrologist. So she has some definite ideas. Amberrose, she has definite ideas about UFOs and aliens. She says in the next 2.5 years, it's not going to be a matter of speculation. It's going to be obvious to everyone that they are there.
I think she's right.
Well, Bill Konkolesky says it's statistically inevitable, and scientists say it's imminent. If they're not here, they're on their way. So I mean, we started actually we started our space exploration with John F. Kennedy like 60 years ago. So I mean, who knows? And there's so many places out there that can inhabit life. I chose the intro was Hamlet. That was Wayne's Hamlet. That was Wayne's version of Hamlet, because I took out all the old English and tried to make it for something that we could understand. But what they talk about in Hamlet is the undiscovered country. And he kind of almost says there's like a fear of the unknown, and he expresses that fear of the undiscovered country. Now, Dylan Thomas said, "Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at the close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the night." So my final thought for you two both is, should we be fearing? They're suggesting here, should we be raging? I mean, I cling to life, but I'm not necessarily raging against the next step. Now, Mary, what do you think? Because I know you're in tune with that other side.
Well, we are walking into the age of Aquarius. We're all in the process of ascension. And it's literally, if you think about Armageddon and the talk in the Bible, it's the truth. And we see it playing out right now, and I hate to say the word politics, but we see it playing out there, the good and the evil. And so in the end, really, if you feed the fear, you let the darkness win. If you feed the light and you have faith that God's going to take care of us, we're going to end up okay. It's that fear of the darkness that holds us back.
Okay, yeah. Amberrose Hammond, you've peered through that veil enough times. I'm thinking you might have some insights.
Well, with what we were just ending on with other life being out there besides the afterlife that we're always searching for, I think with other life forms, it's like just welcome them. And like Mary said, don't fear things. I think if there's other life out there, it could have destroyed us a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I think
it's
already, I think
That's
it's already here. And so I think that the government's been leaking stuff slowly. Some speculate it's a slow disclosure. And maybe and at this point, after we've been through this year, 2020, why not let the aliens land? Because everyone will just accept it this year.
Well, we talked about,
Yeah, I think it's already here. And so I think it's already here. And so I think that the government's been leaking stuff slowly. Some speculate it's a slow disclosure. And maybe, and at this point, after we've been through this year, 2020, why not let the aliens land? Because everyone will just accept it this year.
we talked about that last night with Bill Konkoleski. It's like the fear. I think the fear is our own human nature. If we can get past that, Well, show's over. I like to always leave us with some inspirational thought. And so the inspirational thought tonight comes from Aristotle. And Aristotle said, "It is during our darkest moments that we must focus to see the light." And right now, I know we're living in some darkness, very dark days right now. So don't allow these dark energies to challenge your faith. Keep the faith and have hope. The hour is just before the dawn. So that's what I'm going to leave us with. I know it's rough times right now, but we can get through this, and I think there's going to be a lot brighter future ahead than what we've seen before. And whether I don't know if it's going to be UFOs that are bringing us new technology as we enter this age of Aquarius, or exactly what. Maybe Amberrose Hammond's going to have some special insights in her new book that are going to push us along the right path. This has been a pleasure. I waited for this, and so thanks so much, ladies.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne.
Yeah, thank you.